The Japanese Empire attacked America and Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941 at around 8 in the morning. And as a result, what was formerly a neutral country, the United States, then got dragged into World War II. Shortly thereafter, many automobile production facilities would be converted to produce equipment for the war. And as a result, the 1942 model year production of automobiles in the United States was truncated, with under 1 million units produced. For purposes of comparison, in 1941, U.S. automakers had produced 3.6 million vehicles, so less than a fourth of what was produced in 1941 was produced in 1942. Consequently, the 1942 models that were offered by automakers were some of the rarest that were ever produced. And there's one that really stands out from others, and that is the 1942 DeSoto that you see here. The 1941 DeSotos weren't bad-looking vehicles. You can see in the photo that they were relatively attractive, although some elements of them, like that grille, are a bit funky. You have the very strong vertical bars, and then on the hood, you have some horizontal bars and this kind of interesting bumper with a lower portion as well as a thin upper portion and some very prominent bumper guards. It's an interesting front-end look, and, well, let's just say that, at least in my opinion, the 1942 DeSoto, as you now see here, is much cooler. The grille was cleaned up versus the 1941 version. The bumper also looks considerably cleaner. It's not that two-piece with that thin upper section anymore. And, of course, you have the hidden headlights. It kind of looks like a face up front there with a large mustache, maybe a little bit like the Fisker Karma up front, or maybe not. In any case, it's an attractive front end of a vehicle, maybe my favorite car from the 1940s overall. And this was one of the first DeSotos that really put DeSoto on the map when it came to style. The mark had been started in 1929 by Chrysler after Chrysler launched Plymouth in 1948, and DeSoto was designed to slot in between Plymouth and Dodge, which also existed at this point. Here's an ad for the 1942 DeSotos. Notice that DeSoto calls out the new airfoil headlamps. This was during this aerodynamic phase of car styling, and I would say the 42 DeSoto was one of those that did it best. But the advertisement also talks about fluid drive, which was something that Chrysler Corporation vehicles offered from 1939 to 1953. DeSoto, I believe, offered it from 1940 to 1953. It was effectively a hydraulic coupling attached to a manual transmission such that you could stop at a stop lamp without depressing the clutch and then take off again. You didn't have to push in the clutch whenever you were stopping, although you did have to employ it when you wanted to shift gears. Now, that fluid drive was one cool feature that was offered in the DeSotos in 1942, but there were many other cool features. However, I have to say that the most interesting feature offered on the 1942 DeSotos and select models was this particular steering wheel that you see here. Now, what makes this particular steering wheel unique? At first glance, it looks like nothing unique. It's basically just a normal, typical two-spoke steering wheel that I have to say is pretty attractive, especially the horn ring and how it almost looks like a three-spoker because of those two spokes that come from the center area to mate up with the horn ring. But it's not. It's just a two-spoke design. In any case, notice that there is a button on the center pad here at the bottom right of it, and then there's also a hole at the top of the center pad. What could that be? And what in the world is it doing here? Well, that is for, believe it or not, a cigarette dispenser. Yes, you need to have your cigarettes ready at all times and very convenient and available to you. So what better place to put a cigarette holder than the center of a steering wheel, since it's pretty close to where your hands would naturally be when you're driving the car anyway, and you just push the button and out pops a cigarette that you can put in your mouth, light up, and go along your merry way and smoke your way to the hospital. Of course, by this point, there weren't any Surgeon General's warnings yet on cigarette packages, and, well, pretty much everybody smoked. It looked cool, and James Dean did it, so why shouldn't somebody else? But here's a picture of the same wheel with a cigarette poking out of the top end. What would happen is you'd open this case, I guess you would call it. Notice that little area to place your thumb or a finger to open it. in the bottom center area of the cigarette case. And then you'd load the cigarettes in vertically, and they were spring-loaded such that when you'd push the button, one would automatically dispense. And then you pull it out, and the next one kind of moves over because of the spring tension, and you can dispense another one. Here's a newspaper clipping that further demonstrates this capability. Notice it says, "For the convenience of the driver, a cigarette case is built into the DeSoto automobile, making it easier for him to reach for a smoke. The holder forms part of the molded plastic steering wheel, and at the touch of a button, it hands out a cigarette. It dispenses 14 before it needs refilling." So you would basically load 14 cigarettes in vertically, and then that spring tension would move them over once one had been dispensed, and then you could push the button again and one would come out. Let's take a look at the inside of this cigarette case now. And there you have it. So you'd lift up this plastic cover, you'd load the cigarettes into the cover, you'd close it, then you'd push the button whenever you wanted to dispense one of those 14 smokes so you could enjoy it for your driving pleasure. I don't think that I've seen such a cigarette dispenser on any other car, and I have to admit that for the time period, it's quite innovative given the relatively high proportion of people that smoked. In fact, I would say in some European countries, this might have even been a great sales feature up until a few years ago, as some countries had smoking rates that were approaching 50% or around that until even just a few years back. Same for other countries as well overseas. But here in the United States, smoking has been something that's been gradually declining over time. And as a result, when you used to see, in some cases, these cigarette holders or cases in cars, or 4+ cigarette lighters in a car, now it's pretty rare to even find one. People just want the USB charging port for their phone or a wireless charge pad. Ah, how times have changed. But back in 1942, if you were looking for a vehicle that would help you smoke without taking your eyes off the wheel, the DeSoto was your kind of a car. And this is one of the strangest steering wheels that I have to say I have ever seen. Can you think of one that is more different? Put a comment in the comments section, because I can't think of one, and I'd be curious if somebody can think of something even better than this. Regardless, because of the war, the 1942 DeSoto production was extremely low, and these vehicles have become very rare today. Frankly, they were even rare in 1942. But they're almost impossible to find, and when somebody has one, they generally want a princely sum for it in order to part with it. And I could see why. This 42 DeSoto is just a great looker on the inside and out, and especially if you have the chance to get one with the cigarette holder, you're going to be driving around in a stylish automobile that your friends will be quite envious of. Thanks for watching, and let me know what you think of this DeSoto, its steering wheel, and its overall styling. And if you can think of a steering wheel that's more unique than this.